Motorcycles are attractive for the same reason that drugs are attractive. Because they're dangerous and some people find them fun, so other people want to give them a try. And yeah, they maybe have a little bit of fun to them in the beginning, but the danger becomes more of an issue the more that you do it. And for some people, they're addicted to danger and they're addicted to doing stupid things, and the combination of the two, getting away with doing stupid things and getting away with doing dangerous things, is even more addictive. And just like drugs, motorcycling can become an all-encompassing thing if you become acclimatized to it. When the danger is such that you need more and more and more to get your high, let's put it that way, then you run into two problems. One, you start taking what is dangerous and what you respected when you started, you start taking it for granted, which is even more dangerous. The second thing is, because you need more and more of a drug, more and more power in that drug, you start doing things which are inherently more and more dangerous. And that's true both for motorcycling and drugs. You see drug heads taking drugs that are, that can knock an elephant on their butt just for the high, just because it's so dangerous. They want to try it. Hey, I got used to taking pot. I got used to doing coke. I got used to doing heroin. Now I'm going to start doing Femitol or whatever the hell it is. This stuff now that they make to knock out horses and stuff they make to knock out elephants. It's the same thing with motorcycles. At some point, you're going to start racing ridiculous speeds on the highway just every now and then, at least for fun, or riding with absolutely no gear on, maybe not even a helmet, just for the thrill of it. You're going to start taking corners for granted at high speeds. You're going to start taking long rides for granted at high speeds. All the stuff that you used to do when you were just beginning, you're going to start taking it for granted. You're going to start thinking it's not a danger, and you're going to just do it and not worry about it. And that's when it becomes the most dangerous, is when you start doing things that are dangerous, but you stop worrying about the danger. You stop thinking and doing it cautiously and thinking that you're going to be getting killed any moment. You start thinking, hey, it's no problem. That's dangerous no matter what it is that you're doing. And that lack of concern, lack of care, lack of respect for the danger is fatal for a lot of people. It's that simple. We get to the point where we get used to danger, we start to take it for granted, and it catches up with us because we don't take it seriously enough. We don't respect it enough. We are not cautious enough for what we do. At some point, people say everybody who rides a motorcycle is going to have an accident. Therefore, everybody who rides a motorcycle should always wear safety equipment like helmets and leathers and so forth and so on. And there's a certain point to that. It's sure at some point everyone's going to have something of an accident. It may not be the same severity, with the same risk and the same danger and the same injury for everybody. But sure, let's say at some point everybody is perfect. Everybody's human. They're going to make a mistake, and at some point they're going to have an accident, quote unquote. But here's the thing. Don't be the person who takes risk for granted because you think you're being smart because you're wearing safety gear. That's where I think you're deluding yourself. Safety gear is good for certain things, but it's no good for other things. Helmets are good to stop impacts on the ground up to a certain point. Leather is good to stop road abrasions to a certain point. And even padded gear is good to stop impacts to a certain point. But it's not going to stop all impacts. Helmets are not going to save your life from every impact. And leather's not going to save your life or save your skin even from every spill on the road. And the other problem is that they don't stop you from being impacted into hard surfaces like trees and rocks and curbs and other cars, which can do compression damage or stress damage like breaking bones. I think ultimately breaking bones is probably the most common thing, where people get severely injured but they don't get killed. on bikes. And don't ever think that safety gear is designed to stop you from getting broken bones. All these expensive motorcycle gear, even with the padding, is not going to stop you from having broken bones, broken arms, broken legs, broken shoulders, broken elbows, broken pelvis. All these things happen to people who ride bikes with full gear on a regular basis. And I don't want to get into an argument about it. I think this is one of the things that's the most dangerous about talking about motorcycles, is arguing with people who just don't know what they're talking about, who have no real sense of logic, who just are wrong, but want to act like they're logical, reasonable, knowledgeable people. And you just waste so much time and so much energy arguing with such people. The bottom line is people break their arms and legs and shoulders all the time. Every day there's somebody crashing a bike. They don't have to be drunk. They don't have to not have a helmet. They don't have to be under the influence of drugs. They don't have to be speeding. They don't have to be riding at night without the proper lighting. It happens all the time. And if you want to be one of those people, forget about how dangerous motorcycling is when you ride because you're wearing safety gear. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so today is, I believe it's Saturday, May the 20th, and I went to the Yamaha demo at DHY Motorsports in Deptford, New Jersey, and I had quite a choice this weekend. It was either go to Suzuki demo in North Carolina, or go to a Yamaha demo out in Pennsylvania, out in Altoona, which is just north of Cumberland, Maryland, maybe about 30 miles north of Cumberland, Maryland, up I-99. And also, they had the Yamaha demo at DHY, and another supposed Yamaha demo down at Atlantic City Cycles, down on the Atlantic City Parkway, almost in the Egg Harbor of New Jersey. And then finally there was a Ducati demo experience, which was at Montgomeryville in Pennsylvania, which is about 40 miles north of Philadelphia. So I ended up going, just picking a choice because I went out last week out to Pittsburgh, so I didn't feel like going out there towards Altoona this week. I just went with the other way, and instead of going down to North Carolina, this place is in Charlotte, so it's pretty much in South Carolina. It would have been a 7-hour drive down there for me. So I said, nah, I'm going to go to these other 2 or 3 over here, just outside of Philadelphia. And so the first one was DHY, which is just across the river in Deptford, which is just southwest or southeast of Philadelphia. So that pretty much ensured that it would be a bunch of flat roads, through urban New Jersey. Not quite, Princeton, but close, that kind of stoplight, flat road grid kind of part of New Jersey, which we all love and hate at the same time. But it wasn't a bad demo ride. I thought it was a good ride. The Yamaha crew is usually more sedate, certainly the most sedate of any of the demo crews that I've ridden with, between Kawi, Suzuki, Ducati, and Yamaha. Almost always the slowest, most sedate. So it was kind of cool. So the surprising thing was when I went out there that they had a good lineup of bikes. I really have not done a Yamaha demo in about a year and a half now, and it surprises me that they have now the FZ1, the FJ09, the FZ9, sorry, it's the FZ10, and the R1. They had the R1S available for riding, and Yamaha is one of the few groups that actually will let you ride their top-of-the-line Supersport. So on the demo rides now, Kawi almost never has demos anymore. Ducati does not have the $12.99 on the Ducati Experience Tour. Only the 959 Panigale now, so they're all happy to call it the Panigale. And I guess Suzuki now has the Gixxer, which they have out now, just coming out. It's also supposedly on tour, but I haven't been to one of the Suzuki ones yet, so we'll see. Anyway, so went out to DHY, which was kind of like this big, square, monolithic, brassy kind of in-your-face place, full of bikes, chock full of bikes in this place, and they had the Yamaha truck out in front, and I got some pictures, but I forgot to check the settings of my camera, so I ended up shooting all the pictures in quarter VGA, the lowest resolution mode on the camera. So I will have to substitute in some stock shots, but let me tell you something. I think that the bikes look really nice in person. I was surprised at how good they looked. They had the R1 in red and black. I'll show you the shots that I took, and then try to put in some better shots. They had the R1 in red and black and white, which is a nice color scheme. I think it looks miles better than that blue and gray and whatever color scheme which it had, which you normally see it in, which I just think is just goofy looking. It just doesn't look right. But the red, white, and black look a lot better. The R1 and the R6 now look a lot more alike. They had the R6 in a matte black, which was bad as shit. It was probably the coolest looking sport bike I've seen in a while. They've redone the front fairing so it doesn't have that kind of curvy look to it anymore. It went back to that more to the old school R6 look, and it looks like they kind of took the old ZX6R front sides on it and put it on there, and it really looks awesome. It had the sort of Jorge Lorenzo front look to it with the striping, but without the number plate, numbers on the actual front. It really looks awesome. And then they had a gray one, and I saw a white one up there, and that bike just looks killer now. I mean, it's just amazingly good looking. I think it looks even better than the R1 does, certainly. And I can see that bike just taking off in popularity now, the R6. It is just an amazing looking sport bike, and for the price, for the performance, it's really, I think it's got a lot going for it. But I didn't ride it because I heard that the engine is unchanged. I've ridden the 2014 model, wasn't all that impressed with it. I've ridden the R6 plenty of times. I know they modified it a little bit in terms of the handling and so forth, but it's pretty much the same bike, just a different styling. And I really didn't want to get on it and go for that again. What I wanted to try was the R1, even though I really have not had the R1 high on my radar because I've been so disappointed with the past R1s since 2005. The newer models R1s have just not impressed me. This one, I rode it, and I'm glad I rode it. It was very good to ride. I thought they'd done a great job of mimicking the 899 with it. And I can get into that in more detail, but let's just say it handled like a big 600, maybe like the Gixxer 750. You really didn't get that sense of imbalance. It was a little bit heavy in the back, but not much. And it just handled really nice. They've tweaked the riding mode so that now there's even more lag, if you can imagine that, than there was before. But it isn't like it oscillates back and forth like it used to. Now the lag between the primary and secondary throttle is so large that you can twist the throttle and do things with it, and you can feel that secondary throttle open and close is nice and sedate, and it's much more calm now in the way it rides. But you have to understand that there is a significant disassociation between the throttle and the actual response of the bike. So, and I didn't see much of a difference between the sport modes. It has 4 modes, the A, B, C, D modes, and then you've got the power settings for each mode, and you've got the traction control, and you've got the slide control. And what I really noticed was that it just kind of is smooth and slow in the terms of the throttle response, but the motor is really kind of mellow, even in all the modes. but it's still, it will still go. If you twist the throttle, you ask it to go. If you get on it, it will still go. But the thing is, now it has to be ridden more like a 600, but it has much more power than the RS6 does down low. It can be ridden down around 3,000, 4,000 RPM now, which is not a lot lower than before, but it's still significantly lower and smoother than it was before. And it doesn't go back and forth at low RPMs. It just kind of purrs along, but it is very, very sedate in terms of the way it comes on the gas and the power delivery. And between that and the handling, it seemed a lot like the Panigale 899. I mean, I have to admit, it was nice, but it was definitely on Valium. So now I'm sure the bike will haul ass if you rev it up into like 8, 9, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 RPM. And one of the big advantages of the R1S is that it is a cheaper bike than the R1 and R1M. So they accomplished that by going back to steel and some of the engine internals. And the red line is only like 12,000. So we'll pick this up in a minute here. I want to talk about this a little bit more. So specifically about the R1, what I noticed was, if you kind of imagine this, say your hand, you open and close the throttle, say to half, and you do it in like a cycle. You go closed, half open, half closed, half open, full open, half open, closed, half open, full open, half open, closed, right? Like in a cycle. And if you say you do that so that you oscillate between fully open and fully closed once every second. So it's back, to fully closed every second. Now, what I notice is the power modes, depending upon how you dialed it from 1 to 4, what they tend to do is that affects the delay between when you open the throttle with your hand and when the secondary throttle butterfly is open, and it affects the degree to which they open. So the lower the power number is, the quicker the responses of the secondary butterflies, but they don't open as much. And what happens when you change that number, the delay increases and then the maximum opening increases. So it gets more intense, it's more peaky, but it takes longer to open up. It's much more delayed if you change those numbers. But there's no way to set it so it really quickly follows your hand. And that's what I think is the issue with these Yamahas now, at least the leader bikes. The FZ10 was a little bit less complex in terms of the throttle modes. You had, A, B, and standard. And there was a little bit of a difference between A, B, and standard. There's no question about it. The B was like the slowest, most sedate, and the A was maybe moderately aggressive. The standard was probably the most aggressive. But even so, they still were not really aggressive. You had to really whack the throttle open to get that bike to jump, to get it to go vroom. I mean, and it was very much sedate but powerful. Now, the worst that I've seen in this is the 2013 FZ1, which they just unleashed the beast on that thing. And I mean, it really gave you the impression that you were riding a bike that just probably had more power than you wanted to handle, that I wanted to handle. And you just barely twitch the throttle, and the bike would just boom, 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 just jump. It was so brutal and quick on acceleration that I was almost afraid to ride it. I really kind of didn't want to ride it, especially on wet roads down in Daytona. And that was the first thing I said when I came back from the demo ride is, how do you dial this thing back? And he said, well, you'd have to take it into the shop and get the engine modes dialed back a little bit. So I was like, wow, this thing is just way too hot right now. But the FZ10 is not like that. It's much more like a fast 800. And I shouldn't say that either. It's much more like a sedate leader bike than it is anything. I mean, it certainly will accelerate. You get enough jump where you can feel the wheels coming up and everything like that, and it's nice and sort of in the middle. The bike that had the most brutal instantaneous response of the three that I rode was the FZ9. That bike was right on the bleeding edge of too responsive. All you do is wick the throttle just a little bit, whip, and it would boom, and it just jet down the road. And it seems like it wasn't the fastest of the three bikes by number, but it certainly was the quickest accelerating, the quickest responses of the three bikes in terms of performance. And this makes me think that what Yamaha has done is looked at the demand for leader bikes in the sport bike market, and then looked at the capability of the average person who buys these things and said, the marketing is successful. We can sell leader bikes. People want to buy leader bikes. But most of the people who want to buy them cannot handle them. They can't handle the power. They can barely handle an 800, much less a leader bike. They might even have trouble with a 750. So what we have to do is we have to dial the power response back so that there's like a governor, a speed governor on the throttle. And yeah, the bike will go fast. Yes, the bike will accelerate. It'll give you plenty of acceleration, but we're going to limit it so it only gives you so much acceleration, no matter how hard you whack the throttle open. And especially at the low RPMs where the bike is barely moving. And it's the same thing that happened with the ZX12R and some of the other the hyper bikes, that they would dial the acceleration back, they'd roll back the Spark Advance and so forth, they'd dial the acceleration back at low speeds in the lower gears, and then give you that power at the higher speeds and the higher gears when you weren't going to get as much acceleration anyway, because the bike was already going so fast. So it was like there was a cap at, say, 0.7 G's of acceleration. And for the R1, it was the lowest of the three. For the FC10, it was a little bit higher, maybe a 0.8. And for the FC9, it was like 0.9 or 1.0 G of acceleration maximum. And I admit that this is in, riding around city streets, neighborhood streets, and under 50 or 60 miles an hour. I don't think the fastest we ever went was 65 miles an hour. But in the first 4 gears, the bikes just would not accelerate that much. They could go fast, but they wouldn't accelerate a lot. The fastest accelerating bike by far of the three that I rode was the FC9. And it certainly had a smoother throttle response. It certainly felt much more sane, but it was still the fastest, the quickest bike of the three. And combine that with the fact that it had more of a dirt bike riding position, high bars, the seat was, dipped way down so that you're right up under the tank. And it was kind of like riding, a big dirt bike. It was the most hooligan of the three, in my opinion. Whereas the FC10 was a decent sports tourer, in my opinion, that had Streetfighter styling, but that wasn't the characteristic of the bike. The bike was really more of a sport tourer than anything else. And the R1, while it had superbike styling, it felt much more like a 750, a Gixxer 750 or something. It could go fast, sure, but it didn't have that high, your backup high arched in the air feel of the old R1, where you're high up, but the seat's really high, and your arms are really low, your hands are really low, and you're really up on your hands and knees kind of riding it. It wasn't like that at all. The seat was much lower. The bars were low, but not too low, not exceedingly low. But the other thing I noticed is that they were really close to my hips. So it felt like I was riding like a midget bike. I really felt like I was too big for that bike. And again, it had the same kind of feel that the 899/959 did in terms of its riding position. And I might even say that this 959 had more space between the seat or my hips and the handlebars. So I can't say that while I felt like the R1 was supposed to be more powerful, it was supposed to be a bigger bike, it handled very little like the old R1, and its riding position was nothing like it. You had to go back to like the GSXR 1000 of 2005, 2006 to get that kind of riding position, where it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't so bad that I had to crane my head back to look down the road. It wasn't that bad at all. It was much more Panigale than anything else. Far and far away from the old R1, where you're up, way up, your butt's way up in the air, your back's out, your shirt's almost always pulled out of your shirt, out of your pants, and you're riding along, and you have to crane your head way back to see down the road. It wasn't like that at all. It was almost like, an $11.99. couldn't complain about it at all, except for the fact that the pegs were a little high and the bars were a little bit too far back, and it just felt really tight. But the bike had wonderful balance. It had wonderful control. It was very well mannered. It sounded nice. It looked great. And for that price, for $12,900, I could see those things going out the door very well. I said to myself, I would buy one of these just to have one. It's that cool of a bike. I'm not saying that it would be the bike I want, but I would definitely buy one of these just to have one. The FC10 was okay. Not really all that inspiring, but I didn't really have any problems with it. The FZ9, I just think that was just, it was, a straight up, hooligan bike. It was just made to pop wheelies, made to race around at low speed. But I didn't think the riding position was really conducive to high speed riding. But the bike certainly was fast. It was quick. It was one of those bikes where you can see drag racing it down through the streets. It was fun and fast to ride. But I still think it was not quite polished enough to where I'd really want one. But that's my report on those 3 bikes from Yamaha. So what happened when I was there at DJY was they had a couple of other bikes that caught my eye. First of all, I saw this FZ8 that was there. It was 2013 FZ8, and they wanted $5,500 for this FZ8, and it looked like it had been scratched at least a little bit on one side. The mirrors had road rash on one side, and it had been painted, and the bar weight on the end was a little rusty in certain spots. But the bike looked otherwise in pretty good shape. It had an Akrapovic on it, and that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Yamaha is selling these bikes with Akrapovic exhaust, or with these. I don't know what other ones there are, but there used to be Kirker, but now Kirkers you don't see anymore. They almost all the FC1, FC10, they had Akrapovic exhausts on the demo line. I was like, going, Jesus. But anyway, it certainly seems that they have caught up to Ducati in a number of ways, that their bikes are much more Ducati-like than before, with the benefit of having, the inline 3 or the inline 4 smoothness at the low end, although the cross-plane crank does take a little bit of that away a little bit. Still, very nice, but it's not nearly as rough and tumble as the Yamahas of the past 5 years or so. And I certainly think that these are good bikes that they have out now. I didn't try the Bolt or like the Yamaha Scrambler or some of the other ones, but they also look really nice. I took a lot of pictures, and I'm really kicking my butt for taking them in quarter VGA, but they're really nice bikes. I'll have to get these pictures from a website or something. Some of these bikes, a lot of them, forget the Tenier and all this kind of stuff. The FJR 1300, forget that. A lot of them just look really cool. They look like bikes I like to own just to have them, just to see, just to ride that bike. It was they just look very cool, and I have to commend them. They've done a great job at the styling of the bikes. I saw VMAX at a place I went to today, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm glad to see that that's kind of gone back into the back. I don't think that it's necessary to go out and get a VMAX, to get a good performing sport bike. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that the leader bikes that they had, the FC10 and FJ9 or FC9 and the R1, are so aggressive and so punishingly brutally fast that they can't be ridden by someone with relatively low miles. I'm sure somebody can go out and kill themselves on it. They'll always be that way. Motorcycles will always be that way. No matter how much they dial the power back, there will always be people who can go out and kill themselves on them. So you can't say that they're going to be safer because they're not as fast. They're just not as fast all the time, as easy, okay? So to get back to that point, I have to talk about the demo that I went to at Montgomeryville, which I will do right now. Let's hop to it. Okay, so today, following up on this, I went to another Ducati Experience tour demo, and this time I wanted to focus on the monsters. I would have liked to have gotten a ride on the Super Sport or the 959 again, just to try it again with the engine braking dial back down, just to see what it's like. But they have a policy where you can only ride twice in a day, and some guys got real pissed off because it says on the website that, up no more than 8 rides per day. But what they're talking about, people, is they're talking about the group rides. That there will be no more than 8 group rides in one day, not that you can ride 8 times in one day. That's not what it says, and I don't know why people think that that's what it means. I mean, it's just optimistic to think that. But no one's going to let you come out and ride 8 rides on a demo ride, in one day. Maybe if there's absolutely nobody there, they might let you ride 3 or 4. But then if there's nobody there, they'll probably shut it down early. So anyway, so the thing is, went out in the Ducati ride, and this was in Montgomeryville, which is a good hike northwest of Philadelphia, but far enough out where we did get to ride on some up and down, twisty back roads, Pennsylvania, style back roads, not too fast back roads. And this is where the problem comes in. This is the yin and the yang of sometimes riding in Pennsylvania, is you can ride on these back roads and real twisty, lots of blind curves and stuff like that, but they're not really fast. Or if they are fast, they're short and fast for brief spurts. And it's not like sustained high speed, riding on highways, which is the best way to really evaluate a bike, in my opinion, because if there's one thing you need on a bike is to be able to ride high speed for long distance, like 75, 85 miles an hour for long distances. If you can't ride the bike at 85 for an hour comfortably, it dramatically shortens the range that you can ride it in one day. Because riding on these back roads at 45, 55, 65 miles an hour is no way to cover a lot of ground. You can ride a lot of twisty, turny kind of roads, but you're not going to go far that way. It's the one big difference, actually one of the many big differences between a bike and a car. They are not nearly as comfortable to ride for hours at sustained highway speeds as a car is. So yeah, you can talk about the wind in your face and all that kind of stuff, but it's just a pain in the ass to ride a motorcycle at 75 miles an hour on a highway full of cars and trucks, because there's all this wind whipping back and forth. And it really does make a difference when you get out there in that wind in traffic and a bike isn't stable. When you get all these gusts and stuff, that's really a problem. But you'd be surprised at how even big bikes can be affected by that. And it's not just that they're small and light. It's that the bike just isn't stable. It doesn't ride smoothly and stably. One of the big things about the Busa is that it is a very stable bike at highway speeds. It's a lovely bike to just get out and cruise and eat up miles on. It's not a great back road corner carving bike, but you can ride it on back roads, but it's not the kind of bike that you go out and it's not a 6R. It's not a Gixxer 600. You have to slow down and take these turns a little slower, but it can turn, obviously, and it's great for just chewing up these straight roads or gentle bends and stuff like that at like 75, 80 miles an hour. Do that all day long. It's a wonderful bike for that. The GSX-R 1000 is a good intermediate for that kind of thing. It's good on highway roads. It's decent on twisty back roads, and it's a good all-around bike. Good power all-around bike. That, I think, was the target for the 899. Okay, and the 959. With the side benefit that the riding position is not as extreme as the GSX-R. The GSX-R is a good riding position in every respect but one. You do have to lean over a little bit so far and down a little bit so far that you have to hold your head up. You have to hold, your head has to come back up, and it does get tiring after an hour or so of riding that bike, of holding your head up and look just so you can look down the road. You end up looking right at the front wheel, and it's really kind of a vicious thing. It's a fun bike to ride, but it's a pain to ride it simply because you have to hold your head up so much. On the Panigale, it's not nearly that bad. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is it's fine to ride these bikes for 15, 20 minutes at a time when they have these low handlebars and stuff, riding it for an hour or 2 or 3 hours and you're holding your head back at a 45-degree angle, that gets hard. That gets really hard. It just gets tiring to do that. The same thing with the clutch. If the clutch is really hard to pull, like the R1 clutch was a little bit heavy, and say the Panigale 1199 or 1299 clutch is a little bit heavy, the harder that, and the Busa clutch is really heavy, and same with the 14R, really heavy. The harder that clutch is to pull in, the less you want to shift the bike, and the less you want to ride it in traffic. Because every time you pull that clutch in, it's like, it's like working out. And it just gets to the point where you don't want to ride it slow, because you got to work the clutch more at low speeds, riding it slow around town. A lighter bike with a little bit less power with a lighter clutch is much easier to ride around town. It's geared a little bit shorter, which makes it easier to get off the line. You don't need to ride it as fast in first gear, which makes it easier to ride at low speed because you don't have to use the clutch as much. And it's just a different experience. So what I wanted to see, and the reason I wanted to focus on the Monster this time, because I wanted to see what the difference was if I rode the 1200 versus riding the 800. So I rode the 848, and then I rode the 1200 S first, then I rode the 848. And now there's some cosmetic differences between those two bikes. One of them, the 1200 has a single-sided swing arm. It has the Olin suspension, and the 848 has a Mozushi or something suspension, so stock suspension, and it has a double-sided swing arm. But it's not the same double-sided swing arm that's on the Panigale 959, 899, or the Scrambler, some of the other bikes. It doesn't have that sort of V look, inverted V look to it. But in any case, so I rode the 1200 first, and I immediately wasn't all that happy because you could tell it was geared long in first gear, and it took took a little revs to get it going, and it would go and it kind of coast off. I think it was geared even longer in first gear than my 12R was, and you cruise it along and you get used to that, having to give it a little gas and slip the clutch and all that kind of stuff. It was great. It was a nice bike. Riding position was relatively upright, but the seat was high enough and the bars were far enough out where you did lean over into the front, even with the high bars, and you sat on kind of on top of the tank and everything, and it was a nice weight and it was a nice size. And when we went out in these back roads and all, it was a nice, and I've always said this about the 1200, it's a nice bike to just kind of cruise along on. It handles well enough. You can still curve corners, cut corners, and it's got enough power where you never really have to worry about it, being out of the power band or something. And it's a fun, nice bike to ride. And it makes nice sounds and all this kind of stuff. And it was good. And I rode it. I rode it down to about 2,500, 3,000 RPM in some of the higher gears, cruising along, and it was nice. It was good. Then I rode the 848. And I got to tell you, when I rode the 1200, I was happy with it. I got off 1200, I was like, wow, I'm having a great time. This is a nice bike. Man, I would buy this bike in a minute. I like it. I was having the time of my life riding that bike. Then I rode the 848. And I'm going to start a new tape. I got to tell you about the 848. All right. So I was happy. 1200 S, nice gray, beautiful red trellis, everything, really nice bike, and kind of hit the sweet spot in a lot of areas. It was a good ride compared to the FZ1, let's say. Good acceleration response on the throttle in all the modes. I again had this problem where I'm trying to hit the turn signal and the thing is bouncing from touring to sport and whatever. And luckily, I never actually got it out of sport mode. I gave up trying to change the engine mode. But that Ducati way of setting the engine mode is so awkward. I just whatever. Not at all like the FJ or FZ1 where you have a lock. You have to push a button in and then select the mode. And it's very simple. You go left, up a mode, left, up a mode, left, up a mode, and it goes in a circle. And then you have to put the thing back in a lock position, and it stays there. It's brilliant. You know, even the other ones, you hit, there's a certain button for going mode, and it changes the engine mode, and you stop hitting that button, and it doesn't change. It's wonderful. Ducati is not like that for some reason. You hit the turn signal, and if you hit it twice or hold it or something, then you go into the menu mode for all the engine modes and all the other settings, and you can change them, and you will see them if you're looking at it when you do this. You can see them blink, like it's waiting for you to finish selecting the engine mode. I don't want to change the mode. I just want to stop the turn signal from blinking. Anyway, so that's something odd about Ducatis, which I'll just leave it at that. You're either going to deal with it or not deal with it. So, in any case, standard Ducati 1200 takes a little bit of revs because it burbles and grinds a little bit, and down around 2,000, 3,000 RPM. Comes on nicely, runs up nicely, runs at a power around 10,000 RPM. You don't really have to worry about the red line too much because, the bike will go up into red line, but 9 times out of 10, you probably won't want to rev it all the way up there. And by the time you look there, it's already at 10, 11,000 RPM. A fun bike to ride, but a little rough. Absolutely. Okay? Because the engine is you trade the 2 cylinders for 4 cylinders and 4 cylinders for 2 cylinders. You're going to make a trade-off between smoothness and response and power. There's no question the way Ducati has handled the throttling on their bikes is significantly different from the way that Yamaha handles it. Okay? No question about it. I rode the 1200 on this thing, and I was happy with it. Okay? Now, then I rode the 848. The 848 is a little bit lower seating position, so you sit down more in the bike. Personally, I thought that the preload in the back was a little bit low because it really was low. I mean, you go significantly down, farther down on the 848 than you do on the 1200. At least I did. And I had to check the sag to make sure it was reasonable. It was only about an inch or two of sag, but it's much lower than the 1200. The bars are about the same height. So on the 848, they're up, more like chest height, but they're still forward. So you still have them out there. And then the tank is just like this big mass in front of you. So I'm like going, what the hell is this? It's more like riding, a sport bike, but it wasn't. When you get on it and it starts moving, it starts to feel like a dirt bike. Again, you start getting that dirt bike feel. Plus, it's geared lower than a 1200. Plus, it has plenty of power. Not even like for a 800. It's plenty of power. And then on top of that, the exhaust is nasty. It burbles and kicks and bucks and spits and blah, 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 blah. It is the nastiest sounding exhaust you've ever heard. It is straight up hooligan exhaust. And it has great throttle response. Great. It doesn't have an overabundance of power, but it has great throttle response. And if you twist that throttle again, like the 848 or the 959, it just goes boom down the road. No fun, no games, no muss. Okay? It just goes. And again, I am struck by the difference between the 800s and the leader bikes. And something is telling me that someone somewhere in legal, if nothing else, is saying, dial those suckers back. I don't care. Dial them back. Okay? I think people are paying extra money for these leader bikes because they sound leader bike, more power. 800, not enough power. 800 slower. 800 bad. Leader bike good. All that kind of stuff. But someone in legal is going, no, they can't handle it. They can't handle it. Dial it back. Now, again, you might be getting the extra power out of these leader bikes at higher speeds and higher RPMs, but at low speed and low RPMs, the gearing is longer, and the engine torque curves are probably not as good. They're not geared to produce as much power at low RPMs as they do. The torque curve is not as biased to low RPMs, it's biased to higher RPMs, biased to make power at the higher RPMs. And they just don't run as smoothly as the 800s do. They might outrun the 800s, but they don't run as smoothly, and they don't run as responsively and as quickly. You can get on the 848 and it's just a blast. The throttle response is immediate, it's smooth, and the bike just goes. It isn't quite like an electric motor like the FC8 was, but you get on it and it's just gone. And it takes right off, and you have to really be on your game because the bike is surprisingly quick. It is easily as quick in the situation of riding it between, cruising, 20 miles an hour and 50 or 60 miles an hour as the 1200 is. Easily. I don't have a stopwatch on these bikes. I'm not checking the G meters, but it's plenty, riding in these demo rides, it's plenty quick. You don't have any shortage of power. The only thing that I really noticed was when I was coming back, and there's this one section of the demo ride that we took that was a straight road and was no lights. It was 50 miles an hour and stuff. And I did notice that in that situation when the wind was blowing a little bit and, there was traffic passing, and again, it was the same kind of situation around an open road and the wind is kicking around, that the Monster 848 started getting a little bit, weavy and uncertain and kind of stuff, and really felt the wind. You really had to be careful. But the bike was an absolute freaking blast to ride below that speed. On those back roads, it was just chewing it up. It was like the ultimate KTM 390 with an 800cc engine. It was a blast to ride. I was like, I can't believe this. This is exactly what the Monster should be like right here. It doesn't need to be this big hunkin' 1200. And it's not like a heavier so much as it is longer and geared longer, the 1200. I mean, the 848 is a light, nimble, quick, responsive, noisy, sinfully loud and rude bike that looks great as a Monster. It looks great, okay? And it's relatively low priced, and it's all the bike you really need for a street bike. It's a great little street bike. And I almost kicked myself. I felt so guilty for not buying one right then. It is a great bike. The only thing that I could think about, that, and I was driving back, the only thing I was thinking about that really worried me about that bike is riding it for an hour or 2 or 3 on the highway at 75 miles an hour. That's the only thing I can see that's a problem with it. And I kept thinking again and again and again, that's exactly where my 12R excels. Right there. 65, 75, 85, 90 miles an hour on the open road, it just chews it alive. It's got boosted power, but it's got better handling, quicker handling, and it will cruise on the highway and you will love it. It is wonderful on the highway. That is exactly where my 12R is a great bike. And it can't quite corner with the quickness and agility of these smaller bikes at low speeds. It's a big bike at low speeds, no question. But it's the high speeds that you really need on a motorcycle. It's fun to ride these dirt roads, these back roads and everything on a smaller bike, but still. And this is the thing that I really have to say. It's hard to find a bike that's fun to ride and comfortable to ride and powerful and stable at highway speeds that still gives you good gas mileage. Okay? It's easy to find a bike that's fun to ride, fast, quick, agile, responsive, stable, at low speeds. There's no problem. There's a lot of bikes out there. I'm not saying the Yamahas were great at it, but they were certainly good at it decently. Okay, there's a lot of bikes that are good to ride at low speeds, cruising speeds at low, under 65 miles an hour. There's some bikes that are great to ride, 100 miles an hour on an empty road in the middle of nowhere or something, with not much wind or something like that. The trick is finding a bike that you actually can enjoy riding at moderate to high speeds for long distances, okay, but still get on back roads, and it's not going to kill you because it handles like a truck. And I don't think that you really can have both of those. I think that's the whole problem. I think you end up having to choose one or the other. And I think that you could talk about the 959 in one hand, a great bike, but I wonder how it handles on the open road. I wonder what it's like to ride that bike because it is kind of cramped and kind of small. You know, ride that bike, you know, for 100 or 200 or 300 miles on the highway. Same with the R1. Okay, I would put those two together. I would put the FZ10 and the Monster 1200 together, you know, and I would put the FZ9 and the Monster 848 together. Okay, they both had very similar characteristics. Certainly the FZ9 was a little bit more aggressive throttle-wise, response-wise, than the Monster 848. But they were similar in terms of the riding position, the way they handled, and the power delivery and the gearing. Okay? I don't see a huge big difference between those two styles, Yamaha and Ducati, except in the throttling. I think that's the biggest difference, is the throttling. The Ducatis definitely have better throttling than the Yamahas did. No question about it. The Yamahas were definitely smoother than the Ducatis. A little bit smoother, not nearly as noisy. Okay, no question about it. But at the same time, they were almost the same price. And if I had to choose between the two of them, okay, I would certainly be tempted by the power of the FC9, but I'd probably prefer the smoothness of the 848. I would certainly be tempted by the smoothness of the FC10, but I'd probably choose the responsiveness and the sound of the 1200. And I would certainly be tempted by the handling and looks of the R1, but I'd probably choose the sound and the looks of the 959. I mean, it's really that close. It seems to me that Yamaha has done a great job of moving their bikes more towards Ducati, but they're still not Ducatis. Now, my question is, where has Suzuki come, in the meantime, and what does BMW bring to the table? So, I tried to get a demo ride for the S1000RR while I was there. The guy wouldn't let me demo it. He said, sorry, we have to wait for BMW to bring a demo bike out, blah, blah, blah. And that goes directly against what I read on every website that I see about BMWs. Ask your dealer for a demo. No. I tried to ask the guy at Montgomeryville again. I tried to ask him about the ZX-10R they had sitting out front. I said, what about a chance for a demo ride on the ZX-10R? He goes, no, sorry, can't do that. Our insurance won't allow us to let anyone demo super sports. Ducati is an exception because they insure their own bikes. And I go, okay, fine. Not a huge problem, but I do have to say that the manufacturers who don't have a good demo program are killing their own sales. Now, I know BMW does offer demos. They do have a demo truck. They do pop up here and there. They've become better this year at demos. BMW has. It's Kawasaki, which almost has no demo program whatsoever. And I think they're kind of sitting on their laurels, but that's okay. I mean, the 10R is a very track-oriented bike, and the 14R, hasn't really changed for years. And I think they're pretty happy with where they are. They've got, the intermediates like the ZX636 and the Z1000 and so forth and so on. They do show up at Daytona. They do show up at Americade. They'll probably be at Thunderdon Valley. Maybe not, because they usually aren't at Thunderdon Valley. But they do have enough presence. But this whole thing about all you have to do is ask your dealer for a demo, forget it. I've been trying to get a demo with a Aprilia for years and never have gotten one. And the only Aprilia dealer that I know of is way down in Richmond. And it just has never happened. I love to demo the 210. I love to demo the RSV4. You know, that's not something I really want to do, is ride all the way on in Richmond to demo these bikes. And even then, it still has to be coordinated with them to do it. It's never actually happened. But I'm going to do a better job this year of trying to do that. So, Yamaha, I think I've covered that base. Ducati certainly covered that base. I'm going to focus more on Suzuki, BMW, and Kawasaki, which means probably going to Americade this year. And again, you know, I think Americade's a great place to go. Great mix of back roads. And the last time I was there, they spent a lot of time racing up and down on the highway outside of Lake George. That was fun. But it's the ride from DC to New York which impresses me the most. It is a long 8 to 12 hour ride. I think it's pretty close to 12 hours up there in a car. And usually, at least part of the road is under construction. Even the highway is under construction. I usually do it at night, and that means driving at night for 12 hours or 8 hours, whatever. And the last time I went up there, it was in the middle of a hurricane. It was raining like crap. In parts of it, it was dark. There were parts of the road under construction, and it was just not the kind of ride I would want to take on a motorcycle. I almost didn't want to take it in my car. I really almost stopped in my car to do it. And there were some parts of it that were nice that I rode in my car and enjoyed and went, man, I wish I had a bike. You know, this would be really nice to ride on a bike right now. But there were certainly some parts where I was like, man, I don't want any part of a motorcycle in this kind of weather, in this road. No part, nothing to do with a bike on this road, in this weather. And I have seen guys riding Harleys in the rain, 2 up on mountain roads, on like I-68, in the mountains, you know, passing me in my car because I didn't want to go fast. I'm doing 65 in my car down these roads. These guys are passing me on Harleys in the rain with no helmet, okay, down these slick-ass roads on I-68, around these turns, with their wife on the back of the bike. I'm like, go. I see these guys in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, riding on these roads, you know, up towards Beaver Run. 2-lane highway, black dead of night, up there, nothing on but a pair of bandanas and a pair of sunglasses in the middle of the night. Go. Knock yourself out. That's too intense for me in terms of motorcycling. To be riding a big-ass bike on some slick-ass back road in the middle of the night. Forget it. With no helmet. No protective gear. Forget it. No way. I had enough trouble riding after it stopped raining. The roads were wet, slick. There was still standing water in places, and I'm riding up there. And, you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's foggy. You know, there have been some things that I've done on my bikes that I have no desire to do again. And at the top of the list is riding on the highway at night on a wet road in the cold. Forget it. I have no interest in doing it. But the moment it dries out and the moon comes out or there's enough light to see, it is wonderful. It's cool. You can just go up there, cruise around. Riding a motorcycle is such a wonderful difference. There's such a difference between it not being fun and being fun as hell. And so much of it depends on how cold it is and how wet it is. I love it and hate it at the same time. All right, let me just fill out a couple things. First of all, I think in comparing the 848 to the Monster 848 to the FZ9 and comparing the Monster 1200 to the FC10 and comparing the R1 to the Ducati 959. Let me just fill in a couple of gaps and some blanks and stuff. First of all, the FC10 is just not that good looking. It's not as ugly as I thought it was. In person, it looks a lot better, but it does not look as good as the 1200. There's no question that in gray or black, you know, the 1200 is an awesome looking bike. It sounds great. I don't think that the FZ10 has really anything going for it. The problem with it is it's a competent bike, but it's that's all. I mean, it's fast, Probably handles okay. You probably can pop wheelies on it pretty easily if you really want to. But it doesn't have anything. It's too bland, if you could believe that, okay, to ride. Because of the throttling. The throttling is just, there's always this kind of like sleepy Valium kind of delay in the throttling. But the 1200 doesn't have any of that. It's just a wonderfully responsive bike. It's a nice bike. The only thing I really didn't like about it was the first gear was a little bit long. The 848, I may have had more problems with that than the 1200, but still I think it was pretty much the same, and except it was noisier. If you can believe that, the 848 was definitely noisier than 1200. But comparing it to the FC09, the FC09 had a much sharper power punch, sure, than the 848, but the 848 is no slouch. It will certainly move, and it is not a problem to accelerate that bike at all. And I think that it's really a matter of aesthetics, and on a simple aesthetics basis, the 848 wins. I like the riding position better. It looks better. It sounds nasty. Sure, the FC09 may not sound as nasty, but you know, that's one of the entertaining things about the Monster. It just sounds really like brutal, you know, and it's like a little monster. You know, it fits that role perfectly. I need to put this back with the other one before the tape. I'm going to have to cut this around some. The R1, the throttle response is so dulled, so delayed, so late, okay, compared to the 959, that if the R1 is a better bike, it would have to be when you're flying around a racetrack at 150 miles an hour. Yeah, okay, fine. Then sure, maybe the slide control and all the other stuff makes the R1 a better bike than the 959. The seating positions are very similar, but not quite the same. Certainly the 959 is a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more street oriented than the R1 is. But they both are very kind of small and kind of tight in terms of your hands being right, you know, out there like a rat, you know, kind of, you know, right in front of you, you know, and your head, you know, going forward a little bit, and you having to hold your head up. And I can only say from experience, having ridden a Gixxer with that same style of riding position for, you know, a day, for 24 hours, that gets to be a pain unless you're doing 80, 90 miles an hour, because it's really hard to hold your head up for hours at a time at low speeds. After about an hour, you're like going, oh, God, I'm so tired. But at highway speeds, it's great. Your head is right up. You know, all you have to do is look up. When you push your head right back up. And it's fun. So this gets me to the point I wanted to make here. There have been a few bikes that I have said to myself, I would like to have this bike to ride for a long time. One of them was my FJ 1200. I still love the way that bike handled, despite the fact that it had trouble with the steering head bearings almost on a regular basis. You know, the front end had been wonked out. The other one was my FJ 1200, despite it had the same problem. It still was a great bike to ride, low speed, high speed, whatever. It was a great bike to ride, great power delivery, everything. I loved it. I still want to buy another one of those. The only hesitation I really have with that is the 30 miles per gallon and the fact that it doesn't have ABS. Those are the only two reasons I would not want to buy another one. The other one, the Gixxer 1000, I can say that I mostly enjoyed riding it, though I still think the bars were a little bit too. I probably would put higher bars on it, you know, just for all-around riding. Not much higher, but slightly higher. And then I've rented an R1 for 24 hours also, and that was a very extreme riding position where you're up on your hands and knees, you know, riding it, and it definitely is an extreme riding position, but that's the way the R1 has been as far as I've known it. Every R1 I've ridden before this one was like that. So my thing is, I think I could enjoy the R1, the 2016-2017 R1. I could live with the throttle. the handling is nice, and it looks great. There's no question. It's definitely, in my opinion, a much more streetable bike than it used to be. Okay? It's still not the 959. It's still not that good, in my opinion. But it would take a extended rental or, borrowing of it or testing of it to really see the strengths of the R1 versus the Panigale, which are probably, the extra 50 cc's of displacement, and I would say off the top of my head, off the bat, I'd put the Panigale ahead of it, okay? It just had much better throttle response, much better engine performance in terms of the responsiveness of the engine. I had no problem with the Panigale other than the fact that it was a little bit tiny, okay? It is enough to make me not worry too much about the 1200, because the 1200 would have slightly more power, be geared slightly longer, and it would cost $10,000 more, okay? Plus, it would get much worse gas mileage than the 959 would, whatever that would be. But that, again, is another disadvantage to the R1. We know the R1 only gets 25 miles to the gallon. How would that be any different than the 1200, and why would that be an advantage over the 959? I don't see it. It's one big problem with these newer liter bikes is they drink fuel like it's, a happy hour at a college bar, and you're going through beer. There's no question their gas fuel economy is too low for really enjoying riding it on the street for an extended period of time. So I just can think of, if I look at the bikes that I've ridden in this past weekend, where would I rank the bikes? I would certainly have to rank the Ducatis above the Yamahas. They did the job. They did the job well. They may have had a few issues here and there, but nothing major. And I just didn't have that same confidence with the Yamahas for no reason other than the fuel economy of the R1 and the throttle lag. I wouldn't say it's surged. It's not that bad anymore. It's a surging, but it's certainly a lag. It's like just, it just doesn't do what I want it to do when I want it to do it. It'll do it, but it'll take a second or two to think about it first. Except for the FC9, which overdoes it. It's just a little bit too much. Okay, so that's, I guess, all I can really say. I've sort of exhausted it, and I hope that this has all made sense. I don't know how I'm going to put video to 25 minutes and probably a good 30 minutes of talking. I think it's more than that, probably 45 minutes. And we'll see. I'll do something video-wise, but believe me, this has been quite a ride experience this weekend, and I'm glad I did it. And I can only say that you got to do this kind of thing, man. You really can't. You can't know what you're not getting unless you've ridden a lot of bikes. To buy one bike, you don't know what you're not getting for the other ones. So I hope you go out there on demo highway, have a good time. It's easier to go for a demo ride or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 than it is to drop $15,000 on a bike and spend 5 years wishing you'd bought something else or thinking about having bought something else the entire time.